my intention would be to bring a member state's perspective on what is actually happening with Dublin on the ground. Now, if I may, I'd like to comment first of all on the title of the session, which reads Responsibility versus Solidarity, and then is dealing with issues of Dublin and the solidarity mechanism. I'd just like to point out that during the negotiations of the pact, the notion of we need a balance between responsibility and solidarity really was a guiding principle in the council, but also in the trilogue negotiations between the council and the parliament with the assistance of the commission. Now, in those negotiations, it was clear that the balance needs to be found between the border procedure and the solidarity. So those are the main pillars of responsibility and solidarity. And the Dublin system, or let's say the system of what member state is responsible to deal with a single asylum application, plays into that. But with regard to the Dublin system, the main balance has been found within the system. So there have been some changes with regard to fixing the responsibilities and time limits. And that's something that's part of responsibility, but it's not the equalization, Dublin and solidarity. Now, when we look on what is happening on the ground, we see that the need to actually determine the responsible member state via the Dublin mechanism is of growing importance. According to Eurostat data, there's a growing number of Dublin cases over the past years. Germany is the most affected one by outgoing Dublin requests and also by transfers. And just for Germany, I'd like to give you the numbers. In 2023, we had around 360,000 asylum applications, and out of those, around 75,000 were Dublin cases. So it's about 1/5 of the total applications. In 2024, the numbers by end August, we had around 175 asylum applications, and out of those, around 50,000 Dublin cases, which is almost every third. It's almost 30% of the asylum applications that have been Dublin cases. And you can imagine that administrating these cases just takes a lot of resources to validate with other member states the responsibilities, to administer transfers of people. Now, we also know that those transfers only work in a limited number of cases. For Germany, it's only around 10 to 15% of the Dublin cases that actually are successfully transferred to the member states responsible. And of course, you can imagine that we don't feel this is satisfactory. Now, why doesn't it work? That has a number of reasons. It has to do with partly complicated administrative procedures, but it also has to do with partly not cooperating member states. And I think all of you know that Italy almost 2 years ago decided to not accept any Dublin transfers again from any member state, which leads to the result that just in 2024 by now we have around 9,000 cases with an indication that Italy would be the responsible member state, which we can't transfer. So Germany will deal with these cases regarding the asylum procedure, housing, healthcare, living subsidies, and you name it. So in short, our assessment is that the Dublin system, which ought to be a balanced system and which is designed to be a balanced system, is out of balance. And what we need to do is to balance it again in order to have a balanced European asylum system in total. Now, what we see with the new pact is that we see parts that would make procedures easier to actually realize the determined responsibility of a member state. And that's something that, of course, we prepare now to make workable. And we also have the need to, as a community of member states, on our way to implementing the pact, also make it better workable and better fill it better with the spirit that it has designed for, to actually make the current rules work again. And that's something which we now aim for. We need an easier cooperation between member states with smoother procedures. The notification procedure under the new pact will help to that end. And of course, we need all member states to adhere to their obligations and accept what has been laid out and agreed on in the European law. That is something which just today in the European Council has been reiterated as well in a political call to implement the pact faster, to prepare for the implementation by actually moving in the direction earlier than 2026, but move there by now. And that also relates to the Dublin system. And we'll see, we are very committed on working on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hornung, and thank you also for respecting so strictly the timing that allows for more debate at the end. So that now's the time for, and I hope you can still hear us for the rest of the session, and we can intervene late in the debate. Now is the time for Professor Francesco Maiani, a full professor at the Center of Comparative European and International Law of the University of Lausanne, the Dean of the Faculty of Law of that university, and that we all know for his extensive and sharp analysis of Dublin and solidarity. The floor is yours, Francesco.
Thank you very much, Paula, for this introduction, and thank you for organizing this beautiful conference and this event. I hope that the exchange of ideas will be fruitful here, because there is much to talk about indeed with this massive legislative package, and probably the most complicated I've ever had in my hands. My task is not easy today, because actually the AMMR, and in particular the solidarity provisions, are among the most complicated I've ever read in European law, but I will try my best. And the first point I'd like to start from is actually not the regulation, but the need that it should address theoretically. We all know that one cannot overstate the importance of effective solidarity for the proper functioning of the common European asylum system. We hear that repeated often, but we rarely focus on the main reason. The main reason is effective implementation of EU law. Without a scheme that reliably corrects the worst imbalances, member states will implement, or rather will continue implementing, CEA's legislation with one thought firmly planted in mind, which is to stay on the right side of the line that divides winners and losers at the game of the common European asylum system. And if that is the dominant thought, respecting the rule of law becomes an afterthought at best, as the repeated and systematic violation of the most basic rights in Europe has demonstrated, the Wild West that we heard about earlier. Granted, there are many other drivers for the lawlessness that we are witnessing, and establishing a solidarity scheme is not sufficient to solve the problem, but it is a necessary condition if we are to solve the problem. We need to eliminate the incentive to violate the law to protect national interest. And that's the main meaning of Article 80. The drafters of Article 80 of the treaty realized this early in time and integrated this into the scheme. So, if we take this perspective, which is not solidarity as a political gesture or as charity, but solidarity as a driver of trust and compliance, whatever solidarity mechanism we create for the common European asylum system must have a key quality or fail. And the quality is to be predictable and reliable. Without this, the mechanism will be not capable of influencing the behavior of national administration, which think in terms of risks and risk management. They tend to think forward. And so without reliability, the mechanism will not be able to generate the trust that is necessary to counteract the incentive to defect. So how does the new mechanism fare in terms of reliability and predictability? I have no time to run through all the features of the mechanism or even just the main ones. For that, may I refer you to the blog post that I published in the series, which is my first attempt at a reading of the regulation as a whole, or at least of that part. Let me just highlight 3 important points that concern, first, the minimum threshold that were referred to earlier on. Second, the way in which the benefiting member states are determined. And third, the practical implementation of relocations. These 3 points are, to my mind, critical for the perspective of reliability, and they deserve attention. Let's start from minimum thresholds. We know, if we have read the regulation, and I assume all of you have, or tried to read the regulation, we know that the regulation establishes a process, a yearly cycle that leads to the adoption of a pool once a year. And so it does not establish a predefined quantum of solidarity. It establishes a framework for negotiation. But wait a minute, I hear you saying, there is a minimum threshold. The preamble says that there is a minimum threshold of 30,000 relocation, 600 million euros that should generate predictability. And it may be modest. Lillian said it's a modest amount of solidarity, but at least it's a guaranteed amount, you might think. And if I come from our experiences, Europe has never seen 30,000 relocation all in a year. So modest, but beyond what we've been able to achieve all this time. Okay, the regulation says that there is a minimum threshold, but the devil tends to hide in the details. Legally speaking, the threshold only binds the Commission when it makes the proposal. The threshold, the article that lays down the threshold, must not be respected by the high-level forum, which is the heart of the pledging exercise of the member state, nor does it bind the Council, which is the authority that establishes the pool, and which must establish the pool, I quote, in accordance with the pledges. So, apart from many other flexibilities that are built into the system, the conclusion can only be that, legally speaking, there is no such thing as a minimum threshold that must be established yearly in the pool. And so, the question of how much solidarity will come down to how much solidarity member states are collectively willing to put on the table 1 year after the other. It may be a lot, it may be little, it may be that it's going to be a very difficult exercise. Granted, if there is not enough, the forum can be reconvened ad libitum by the Council. So the process can go on indefinitely. But unless you have consensus on a high level of solidarity, you won't have it. And granted, below certain thresholds, there will be limited correctives that kick in, such as the mandatory responsibility offsets. But please read the fine print with an aspirin close by. Read the fine print and you will discover that the threshold that is guaranteed is A, conditional. It's not enough that there are less pledges than 30,000. More conditions must be fulfilled. For instance, it must be fulfilled that the Council has reconvened the forum. So there is a political filter. You need an act of political will to say, there's not enough, we need one more go. And furthermore, there are other conditions which are linked to the fair share of member states, which must not be exceeded. And it's not very clear what pie we are looking at when we talk about that fair share. And finally, there's the inherent weakness of offsets. For offsets to work at all, you need to have transfers to work on. To put it differently, for a member state to offer offsets as an alternative to relocation, there has to be enough traffic between that state and the benefiting state. Now, if you look at stats, there are at least 20 member states that are regularly below 200 outgoing transfer yearly. Those states will not be able to be nailed to offsets. Or if you want to look at it in the reverse, in order to benefit from offsets, you need to receive many transfers. And there are statistically about 20 member states per year that receive 200 or less transfers, including Greece, Cyprus, Malta. So it's not an ironclad solution. And on the whole, there is no ironclad guarantee that even the minimum we talked about is guaranteed. Next item, determining who is to benefit from the pool. The regulation, if you read through the way in which the Commission must determine which are the states under pressure and the rest, there is an infinite array of criteria that need to be taken into account, but there is no hard and fast criterion to tell the Commission or to constrain the discretion of the Commission in deciding which member states are to be considered under pressure. This may be a good thing. Flexibility is good, but in terms of reliability, in terms of predictability, it's not what you really want to have. And this uncertainty is compounded by a second thing, which is when it comes to the implementation of the pool and the fact of giving access to the pool to the benefiting member states, there are further variables that enter into it. The Council may, for, I quote, objective reason, refuse access to the pool to states that have been declared to be under pressure during the year, and no further criteria are listed. And there is another one that deserves mention. If the Commission says that a member state is systematically misapplying the Dublin rules, the other member states are magically freed from the need to provide solidarity to that member state. Which, I mean, assessing if a member state is systematically violating something, we should know from the experience under Article 7 is not math, okay? So there is quite a bit of uncertainty there too. Let me add a little side note here about how asymmetrical this conditionality is. States that violate Dublin are punished by being excluded from the beneficiaries. States that exert the most violent abuses on migrants in the woods around the border or detain migrants in deplorable conditions will face no such consequences, and I am at pains to understand the logic behind this selective choosing of which parts of EU law are important and which parts of EU law can be dispensed with. Third point, and I see that I'm on track with the time. I look nervously towards Paula, and I think, yeah, that's good. 5 minutes is good. Before I step to the very last point, let me reach an interim conclusion. Just on the basis of what I said, we can safely say that the insurance contract that the regulation offers to state under pressure includes very significant blanks and a good helping of small print. If we move then to the actual implementation of the core part of the relocation mechanism, the lapsus was well intended, the core part of the solidarity mechanism, which are relocation, then here it takes a serious leap of faith on the part of the states under pressure to believe that everything will be all right. I mean, we have 30 years of experience with the Dublin system behind us, where the average yearly transfer were 16, 17,000, on peak years, 20,000. And then we've made the experience of the relocation programs where out of about 90,000 persons that needed to be relocated, about 34 were relocated, 34,000 over 2 years. So the precedents are not all that encouraging in terms of the administrative capacity to move large number of people in over the course of 1 year. Now, the outlook would have looked better if, in this context, the legislator would have chosen to give applicants a more active role in selecting the member state of destination. It is well known and borne out by the statistics on the effectuation of transfers that voluntary transfers are way more effective and economical than involuntary transfers. And here we are not talking about giving any sort of, free choice to anybody. It's hand-picked asylum seekers that would have had to choose among member states that were by definition not under pressure. So it was a very controlled environment in which to break the taboo of free choice. But the legislator opted not to. And this is a very good example of taboo-based policymaking as opposed to evidence-based policymaking. And in sticking to the taboo, which is that those transfers are conceptually involuntary transfers because the consent of the persons is not a legal requirement, well, then you have to make complicated procedures. You need to make, appeal rights and all that. And we end up with the bureaucratic monster of a procedure that can entail 2 Dublin procedure, 1 relocation, and 2 transfers, as if transferring somebody and running a Dublin procedure was an easy thing, which is not what we have observed in past years. So I come to my conclusions. If we make a legal analysis of the black letter law of the regulation, then, a rather clear conclusion comes to mind. The mechanism does not really fare that well in terms of predictability and reliability. And to my mind, that translates to it may fail at generating that most precious good, which is trust and compliance within the common European asylum system. This, of course, is not at all the final word on the matter. One thing is the law in the books, one thing is the law in action. And just to take my 3 examples, you could have a high-level forum that constantly follows and exceeds the proposal of the Commission, creating some kind of predictability there. You could have Commission and Council that clarify the use of their discretionary powers by enumerating criteria. That's entirely possible. And you could also have relocating states that make wise use, along with the EU Asylum Agency, of the matching procedure that is provided for in the relocation, and so can elicit the willing cooperation of candidates. So there is work to do, and optimists may yet hope for a well-functioning system. But it's going to be an uphill struggle, and it will require a whole lot of lesson drawing as we go, which is something that, judging from the past, the EU legislator is not very good at in asylum matters. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Maiani, for this in-depth analysis of these selected key elements of the solidarity mechanism, clarifying some things and raised also new intriguing questions that at least not, I don't know if we, but the EU and member states should need to work out before implementation. So a lot of questions for the debate time afterwards. But now let's welcome Professor Noll. Is he there?
I'm here, if you can hear me. No, you can even see me.
We can see you and hear you. Welcome, Professor. I think he does not need to be introduced. He is full professor of someone wants to talk at the same time. Okay, thanks. So, Professor of International Law from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. As I said, no need of introduction. We all know your seminal works on international asylum law that help us to learn on asylum law. So please, the floor is yours to comment on this report on the solidarity mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I hope I can be heard now. Seems to be the case. You're not saying anything different. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Hello to everybody in the room. I'm sorry for not being able with you in place today. Before commenting, I would just like to thank Philip for having me in this reduced form. Anyway, that's a great privilege. It's also a privilege to follow you, Francesco. I think the analysis was very incisive and could have very well directly moved to a discussion without my comments. I want to say three brief things, though, if I may, and I'd like to do what we tell our students. We tell our students start with what's good. So what's good about this? I think we should pause for a moment and just think that the deliberation of each participant's dues to the community in the form of pledging is at the core of historical solidarity mechanisms. It's a good thing to have pledging in there. It introduces a marketplace of commitments where individuals or individual entities are remade into a single joint entity, a joint enterprise, a trade union, what have you. So iterative pledging, as we have it in these yearly high-level solidarity fora, that's a good thing. I mean, we would tell as much if we had ever been, engaged in business negotiations, or if we had ever read the literature of game theory on iterative pledging. So I think that's the good part we would need to acknowledge before we set out to critique whatever there is in the AMMR. So number two, let's get on to the main problem then. And I think the main problem here is how to compensate for the political cost for a member state of being seen as soft on immigration of the purportedly wrong race, class, and gender. That's something that's not part of our analysis, it seems, but it's determinative of the outcome of these iterative meetings at the high-level Solidarity Forum. Because I think, Francesco, you were already at it. You were saying that it's going to be a game which is about being on the right line that divides winners and losers. And I think this particular political cost is something we should keep in mind. From where should the motivation from pledging relocations come in a situation where the political center of many member states is committing to increasingly violent forms of immigration control? So, which government would like to commit to what will be perceived as additional protection in Brussels, of all places, if the main selling point of its domestic politics is the very prevention of a certain form of immigration? That's the second point. The third, I'd like to reflect with you on why pledging is good, but the particular AMMR version of pledging is bad, and that comes over and above the very incisive analysis that Francesco already put in front of you. Because I would argue pledging needs to be situated at a fundamental level. It needs to set the fundamentals of a joint enterprise, of a joint community like the European community. The AMMR is situated far out on an insignificant capillary of the CAS. I'm sorry to say that. We're now really into microengineering. And I think the fact that there are so many kind of rules and sub-rules built into it, and it's so hard to read this darned piece of legislation, tells us as much. We're really looking at something that has not got the requisite degree of centrality, the light of the day, to put it. Let's just remind ourselves that pledging works if it is done behind a constitutive veil of ignorance, which is the useful message of the 1971 book by John Rawls on a theory of justice. To remind you, it's really very well known, it establishes a thought experiment about an original position we are in when we deliberate the rules that make up a just society. We do not know what status we will have in it later. We have to make up the rules beforehand, before we know what gender, what color of skin, what social standing, and what income will be assigned to us. That's pledging at a fundamental level. That's where solidarity is building communities. That's what we would arguably need to reach for. Let me end with a thought experiment along those lines. What if member states had not pledged allegiance to the Dublin Convention, which I'm sorry to hear that my previous commentator did indeed pledge to again? What if member states had thrown out the CAS in its entirety, including the primary law it is based on, and started afresh against a 25-year time frame that includes the climate and demographic crisis to come, and set out to negotiate the rules for a just European community, including migration as just one other facet? I think the price tag for solidarity worthy of the name is not less than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your precious comments. And probably now we turn to our last speaker, and then we can start our discussion with you too, Professor Noll. So thanks a lot. Now it's the time for Isa Papailiou. He's Justice and Home Affairs Counselor on Migration and Asylum from the Permanent Representation of Greece to the EU. So the floor is yours. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you some thoughts from the part of practitioners and from the part of the outcome of this painful almost 8 years discussion on the Pact of Migration and Asylum. However, as a first thought I want to share with you is that as we can see, even in the most sensitive political issues, we can reach a consensus. And we need to maintain the spirit. The challenge of the pact from the part of the member states now lies ahead of us, and this is the implementation of, yes, the rules are complicated, the texts are difficult, we need a lot of discussion on this, we need a lot of support. EUAA and Commission will help us in this exercise, but it's not easy. It won't be easy. This I can assure you from the practitioner side. Dr. Hornung pointed out that responsibility is not only the Dublin rules. That is right. The new system, as designed, requires significant investments from the part of the member state in an infrastructure and human resources. It is not enough, the personnel, I can assure you from the Greek side and the Greek Dublin unit, to shoulder the new AMR procedure, even if it does not look in principle that different than the existing Dublin 3. So this is only just an example. New procedures have to be introduced. Screening, border procedures, return from the border. And the new Dublin rules now operating in stricter deadlines. This is a lot of responsibilities. Can the newly solidarity mechanism introduced in AMR counterbalance this burden? Here again, it's a matter of will. The positive element is that it's supposed to be evidence-based. Unless we take into account seriously the burden faced by a member state, and that is the number of arrivals, recognition rate, and return actual implemented returns, we would end up in a system that is clogged, and it's not only clogged for the first entry member state. Consequently, it will clog also for the remaining member states. So if we are to implement a truly European solidarity mechanism, we need to take the actual conditions into consideration. The novelty that it's from our side we see, it's the annual cycle. But here, yet again, Professor Maiani pointed out the specificities of this annual cycle, that is the Commission recommendation that it's not binding, the procedure in the high-level forum. It's for us now the challenge again to avoid, to turn out this debate in a toxic debate every year. All of us have the interest to make the new system work, and the challenge will be constant, and we have to work on it consistently. Is it easy? One could ask. I have to admit, no. From the point of the perspective of practitioner, I can assure you, having served in Lesbos during the period 2015-2017, it's very complicated. Lessons learned there. Solidarity at the end of the day depends on numbers and political will. If the numbers exceed and the political will is not there, solidarity will not be accomplished. And yet again, implementation. We need good coordination, continuous coordination of all stakeholders, clear SOPs, and capacity. To do that, we need also the financial resources. As a last point, I would like also to flag that we cannot see AMR in isolation and the solidarity mechanism. Even if the best efforts are placed in the internal aspect, nothing at the long run can be achieved if we don't have the policies at the external dimension to reduce primary flows, and of course to make the return system and turn the return system into a European return system effective. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments and for pinpointing these important elements. I think we are very good on timing, right? And after we have had, as I'm sure you agree, a very rich overview of what the Asylum and Migration Management Regulation is to provide to the common European asylum system in terms of responsibility sharing and solidarity, and all the challenges these new and old rules raise in terms, we have heard, implementation, efficiency, fairness of the system, sustainability, protection of persons. There are lots of questions. I have a lot of them, but let's start with the important thing is that you can bring your questions and comments to the speakers. So let's start with that. We still have almost half an hour before lunch. So if probably we can start with online questions. And you can please introduce yourself and formulate your short question to the speakers. Is there anyone online who would like to start with the questions, or should we pass to present attendees? So, okay, so let's go for the room here. Can we collect maybe 3 questions? Yes, Professor Gill.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thank you very much to all of the speakers. It's been an absolutely fantastic presentation. I'm Elspeth Giles, University of Liverpool. I wanted to come back really to Tino about Article 43, because I would be very keen to hear your reflections on how judges in the member states are supposed to be able to provide the effective remedy under the Charter, under 47, Article 47 of the Charter, in the context of these new arrangements.
Second question? Yes, here, Professor Lizard.
Thanks a lot. My name is Professor. I used to be a professor at the CU in Vienna. And my question is directly to Gregor and Francesco. And it goes to the fundamentals Gregor invited us, that is the solidarity community. We take it for granted that EU member states ought to be solidaristic with each other. And then we speak about return rules and all rules approach and everything. So the question to both of you is it justified that we envisage a solidarity community limited to the 27 member states? And justice and fairness and due shares are always calculated among the EU member states. What if we sought in a broader frame? What if the whole Mediterranean is included? What if we are speaking about a global responsibility sharing, as suggested by the Global Compact?
Charlotte. Third question, maybe? No. Okay. Yeah. No. So we can start with the answers if you would like, Konstantin.
If you have any question, please write your hand.
Thank you for the question, because I think it's very important to look at the initial proposal, because with the ICF evaluation in 2016, before the Dublin IV proposal came, judges were labeled as a problem in the Dublin system. Judges were labeled as the ones who look too deeply into the causes and into the legal provisions of the Dublin III regulation, and that takes too much time. And that was the label that was put on the legal remedy. So it is very clear that the legal remedy should be limited. And I read the quote to you how it is justified. Still, it is in obvious violation of Article 47 of the Charter not to look at everything that is actually affecting a person. And of course, a wrong use of the criteria that are binding is something that is a violation, and that should be, and person should be able to bring that to court. So judges have basically in the European system the two possibilities, to say, okay, this is a new piece. Okay, okay. I'm very sorry. So I was asked to repeat. I tried to summarize the first part still. Judges were labeled as a problem in the whole conceptualization of like evaluation of the Dublin III regulation. So judges were under pressure to deliver faster and earlier decisions and more implementable decisions. And so now they're in the situation that Article 43 of the AMMR limits the scope of the legal remedy, but it says it has to be an effective legal remedy. And an effective legal remedy is defined in the Charter in Article 47, and it encompasses all the violations that are done in the procedure of determining the member state, which means it should be possible, even though it's not in the law, to challenge the wrong use of the criteria. And judges have two possibilities. Either they say, okay, this is an open question because here is a tension between Article 47 of the Charter and Article 43 of the AMMR, and put the question to the CJEU. This is probably what they should do. But as I know, first instance judges they don't want to do that because it delays all their procedures. So they have a lot of Dublin procedures. If they send one to Brussels, they cannot decide on the other ones. So probably it will be for the highest courts of the member states to clarify these questions. And then it will, from my perspective, especially if a system is federalized like in Germany, you will have a period where judges decide this very differently. And they're in a very uncomfortable position through this new legal remedy under the AMMR.
Yeah, Francesco, you want to react to the question?
Yeah, there was a question from Boldizar, which was addressed also to me, and it's a extremely pertinent question, and I don't have any definite answer in the pocket. I can only say this: it's a very good observation, and it focuses our mind a little bit on something that we are not observing, which is the level of interdependence that exists between us and all the states that are around us, by us meaning the EU plus. I would still say this. I think that there is a level of interdependence that is created by the membership in the Schengen area, and even more by the fact of being in the EU and the Schengen area. I work in Switzerland, so I'm navigating the difference between the two things very, very carefully. That calls for an increased and I would say almost unprecedented level of solidarity in asylum matters when you compare that to the general call to solidarity that you find in the preamble of the Refugee Convention. A more structured process, we can expect that also because member states are part of a process of political integration. So you can expect, or you could have expected, perhaps it's more correct to say, a greater readiness in sharing also in the rigors of solidarity. Solidarity is difficult. It's a very difficult discipline, politically speaking. But what I would say, and this goes completely in your direction, is that this solidarity is not exclusive of solidarity with all the other members. I was about to say member state, but all the other states that are involved in the same phenomenon. And this includes also the states of transit, and we expand the focal from asylum to migration, also the states of origin. And for those of you thinking, as I was thinking, in immediate reaction to Boldy's question, well, but Europe is giving a lot of money to support capacity building around those states. It's a relevant question whether that is solidarity, or at the very least, whether that moves from solidarity thinking, or whether it is a form of do ut des, in which basically migration is a problem that we are willing to externalize in exchange for other goods, but not the thought of solidarity as managing together a problem that is shared between stakeholders. That's all I have, Boldy. Sorry.
Professor Noll, you want to react to Professor Naji's question?
I must confess that it's difficult for me to hear the questions from the floor. For some reason or other, the microphone keeps cutting out. So I'm sure it was a very pertinent question because I know Boldischer, but I can't answer it.
Any more questions from the audience, online? Yeah.
Can I just add one remark to Boldy's question, please? Because if you look at the AMMR, you also have the associated states there, and they're not bound by the solidarity mechanism, and they're not part of the common framework. So you could also look at internally in the Dublin system that solidarity is not fully mandatory.
Nikos? Hello. You are muted. Maybe if not, we can pass to. Does it work? No.
Muted now? I'm okay now?
Yeah, we hear you
Hi.
now.
Hi.
Please, Nikos.
Unfortunately, I'm not there to be part of the very important conference. I'm wondering what your comments are. During the time, the day after the decision, the very important decision on Cyprus and pushback at the European Court of Human Rights was taken, whether it was found that it was violation because of the pushbacks. The president of the EU was in Cyprus. And instead of raising the issue of what is to be done about the routinization of pushbacks, which are actually happening now at this moment, even outside the war-torn waters, territorial waters of Lebanon, by the Republic of Cyprus, the president of the European Commission congratulated the president of Cyprus for its policy on stopping the flows of migrants in Cyprus, conflating again asylum seekers with the irregular immigrants. I'm wondering whether this is a general policy and an attempt to obfuscate and ignore the asylum issues that are raised by the war, particularly in our region, the growing situation after the attacks on Israel in Gaza, and the general situation that we face with accentuated possible asylum applications as a result of the expansion of the wars. And I wonder if the response of the EU with the migration pact would not be an optimistic one, but a kind of ignoring the issue of asylum. Please, any of the speakers, I would love to hear their comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we have, Chiara's question too? Hello?
Me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Thanks. I'm Chiara Rauce from Tilburg University, and I have a question for Professor Maiani. And my question is about the difference from the individual perspective of the asylum seeker between relocation and Dublin transfer. I see that there the problem is the movement from one member state to another. Are there judicial avenues to challenge the possibility to effectuate a relocation? And if we can expect that the case law developed for Dublin transfer will also be applicable in case of relocation to stop relocation? And if yes, member states, how shall be held accountable for relocation that cannot happen because the risk to violate fundamental rights of the asylum seekers? Thank you.
Thank you. We had a third question from the room, I think, there. No, I think it's Nikos still. Oui. Okay.
So I'm in Brussels, and it's a question to Professor Hornung. It's about Article 5 of the regulation. It says that states keep the right to send applicants back to third countries. So I wonder if this is just lipstick on a pig, or if this is a new monster that has been created. So if you could explain what we should understand by the right to send applicants back to third countries. And I would like to ask another question to Professor Maiani, if I may, about solidarity. If I understand well, solidarity is the versus relocation, but it can also be contribution to border control. It can be financing fences and walls. And I should say I'm quite shocked when I'm here at the university reading solidarity on those walls. And when solidarity in the documents may mean things like that. Well, that's just a thought that I would like to hear you on that.
Yes, there's another question there. Lilian, please.
I have a question for Tino. This interplay between Dublin and the reception conditions and detention, you noted already in your talk the discrepancy, but then I was thinking very practically, thinking for a practitioner. So how could this look on the ground in order to still be compliant with the Charter, Principle of Human Dignity, Prohibition of Inhumanity, Degrading Treatment. So are we talking only about, for example, reduction of allowances, while all the rest is provided in terms of accommodation, subsistence, etc. So I'd like to hear this. Thank you.
So maybe we can, well, a last question here in the middle. And we reply to them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Thomas Willekens
right
from
there.
Vluchtelingenwerk Vlaanderen, and I have a more theoretical question for Professor Ruska on what another world could be for Dublin, referring to the activation of the TPD and the decision of the member states to not activate the Dublin mechanism that was in the DPD. To me, that was a huge eye-opener to what could have been as well in the asylum acquis, and I'm wondering, what do you take away from that insightful decision at the time, and what do you envision as a possible alternative to Dublin, taking into account that moment with the TPD? Thank you.
Should we answer those questions? So,
Whichever order you prefer.
Konstantin, you would like to start?
I can start. Thank you for the questions. With the Article 16.5, it's nothing, it's the same text as Article 3, para 3 of the current Dublin 3 regulation. So it was always there. A member state can, if this member state is responsible, use the safe third country rules to transfer the person further in and not look at the material question whether the person needs protection. But we have not seen that materialize yet in a lot of procedures. And there was only one CJEU case that basically said the Czech Republic is not allowed to look deeply into the Hungarian practice to send persons back to Serbia under this provision, and that did not take any further measures by other member states. So we still have then, and it was illegal what Hungary did, but the person had to go to the Hungarian authorities and not to the Czech authorities to prevent that. But of course, there is a potential there, and it was always warned that there is a potential that asylum applications will be not looked at in substance in the European Union if member states would apply that provision. The second question on the reception conditions as a sanction. Administratively, this is very difficult. So what happens, for example, because in Germany, we have that provision in the Asylum Seekers Benefits Act at the moment, you have sanctions once you have a negative decision. And these sanctions are basically that you get less money that you are actually given to spend it yourself, pocket money as we call it, and you will be accommodated in a center for sure, and all of these things. So material reception conditions are given in kind. So that could be one sanction. What is very difficult for the administration is that they have to keep track of every person's asylum procedure during accommodation, because they need to know when this sanction actually applies and if the sanction applies to this person. And it's administratively so complicated that it's obviously far more expensive to have a sanction regime here that differentiates if you look at the minimum existence that you have to actually keep anyhow. What I see in this provision, and there is a parallel provision in the Reception Conditions Directive, that this will incite preliminary rulings to give questions to the CJEU, what is actually the Charter providing? So we will learn from this provision what is actually the minimum the Charter provides, and the CJEU will have to clarify that. that is my perception of that. And what can be done is to basically say it's administratively unworkable. This is what I had in the second A of my last slide. And for the theoretical question on TPD, what one can see that actually free choice worked more or less in the beginning, and now a lot of member states say it can't be correct that a person that has temporary protection in one member state can freely choose to go to another member state and get protection again. So I think just the free choice and then choose the member state where you can have the protection will also not remedy the problem. But what I see, what you can learn from the TPD is that persons that are better integrated and have access to integration measures earlier are, even if they do not get any protection status, more, let's say, self-reliant and more able to also follow a return decision. And the sanctions do not work, and we know that from a lot of studies. So you would have to take some sanctions away from Dublin in order to make it function. And a first step is explaining it better, as the AMMR wants us to, but I think there are a lot more steps to take in, and the first would be get rid of Article 33, which is the entry criterion. Thank you very much.
Francesco?
Yes, so if I kept track correctly of the discussion, I have two questions. One is the one from Chiara Racea. If I understood it correctly, the question was whether there is a remedy for relocations that are not happening, actually. So what happens, is there any form of legal protection? I hope I got the question right. If there is any legal protection when a person is expecting to be relocated, but that doesn't happen for whatever reason. Now, here we should be mindful of the fact that the article on the implementation of regulation refers back to Article 43 on remedies mutatis mutandis. Now, Article 43 is about remedies against transfer decision, and the implication here, at least to the mind of the legislator, was probably that this was a remedy against relocation decisions, because once again, relocation decisions are not voluntary. People are not required to consent. So it may well be that they object to it and may want to make an appeal against it. Is there an appeal against non-relocation? If the parallel holds, I would say yes, there is now a Grand Chamber judgment, INS, which points out that an effective remedy must be available for the vindication of the whole gamut of rights accruing to a person under EU law, and pointing out specifically that even decisions that are not transfer decision must be amenable to challenge. Now, of course, all of this links into the point that Tino made before about the limitation of grounds of appeal, because typically a person objecting to the non-implementation of relocation will be not raising a matter of real risk of being ill-treated in the state of destination, rather the contrary, but he will rather be pointing at, say, family issues. And family issues are only very incompletely covered by Article 43, to the point that I argued elsewhere that Article 43 is in violation of Article 8 and 13 of the European Convention of Human Rights, because it doesn't guarantee a full remedy against the violation of a right to family unity. So if we establish that there is a remedy against non-transfers and against non-relocations per the decision in INS, then we have to also clear the hurdle of the limitation of the grounds. I think it's achievable by mobilizing human rights standards, but it's a story to be completely written. The other question is not, if I understood it, was rather an observation than a question, and I would tend to agree with that observation. And I think that with that, perfectly on time, I can give the floor back to you.
Thank you. Maybe Dr. Hornung, Professor Noll, you have any comment, reaction to these issues before we
I think I'm fine on my side. I thought it was very instructive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Dr. Hornung, I don't know if you are there still. No? Isa, you have any comment? So I very proudly say that this is the time to thank you. It's been a true privilege to hear your super presentations, all your thought-provoking and stimulating points in the discussion. You have certainly helped us to read through these highly complicated provisions of the AMMR. The implementation challenges are really complex, but this is about the fate of the common European asylum system, of the Schengen area, and on the human lives of people coming to the EU for protection. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. In the meantime, let's get strength enough with a lunch break and resume back at 2 for our third session. Thank you very much to all for your attention and your questions.